Good morning. I'm Ingrid Silver and welcome to Monday Morning Musings, a series of interviews with senior female lawyers. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Yana Valletta, who is Group General Counsel of Global Fashion Group. Yana, good morning. How are you?
Good morning to you, Ingrid. I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm pretty good for a Monday morning. So Yana, let's kick off by having you tell people a little bit about yourself, your background, your journey, and where you work now.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'm Yana Valletta. I'm the Group General Counsel of Global Fashion Group, and Global Fashion Group is the leading online fashion company in in growth markets.
Mhm.
So that covers Russia and CIS, it covers Latin America, it covers also Southeast Asia, and we are also present in Australia and New Zealand.
Mhm.
And we bring fashion and lifestyle products to consumers across 4 continents. Global Fashion Group has 13,000 employees spread in 17 countries. And I have the immense pleasure of having joined Global Fashion Group in 2016, yes, which is when I moved to London.
Mhm.
And it's been a great experience ever since.
Mhm.
I am a Italian Canadian um,
Citizen?
female lawyer,
Yeah.
citizen, thank you. And I'm admitted to the Canadian bar in the French province of Quebec.
So you speak French
And
as well?
yes, I speak French as well, exactly.
Mhm.
And I've been working in Europe for, I think, about shy of 15 years approximately. I started off in private practice,
Mhm.
and after approximately 5 years, I moved to the in-house career, which I've been delighted with ever since.
Mhm. And so you're from Canada, but you're Italian, you speak French, you've lived all around the world, and you're supporting a business which spans the globe really, and including a number of really, one might say, challenging territories, for want of a better word. And added to that, if I remember correctly, you have a little girl who is 2 years old, is that right?
2 years old, yes.
So you're a mom as well.
Mhm.
Lovely. So fascinating background, and hopefully we'll get to come back to that in a little while. But what I'd really like to jump into first, because this is a series about taking stock of 2020, and we are coming to the end of 2020. How do you think you'll remember 2020?
Oh, 2020 for me is for me personally and professionally and as member of a community, it's been a fascinating year. And to borrow the words of my coach, she said to me, "Not all the storms that come are there to disrupt your life. Some are there to clear your path." And I think this is a very good way to
Mm.
summarize 2020 at many levels, whether it's in our society or at a personal level.
I love that. It's funny how just shifting your perspective on disruption can make you feel somehow empowered,
Hmm.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. So professionally, what are the key learnings and takeaways for you from what's happened over the past, what's coming up to a year now? So,
Yes. Well, professionally, I mean, for Global Fashion Group and for me as a lead, 2020 was a great year. So as a company, as an industry, as a sector, obviously e-commerce has really been propelled because people still needed to continue living even though there was a lockdown, and therefore it has for Global Fashion Group, it has really propelled our growth, and that has been extraordinary for us. And I think what has been very telling is the power of our frontline workers. And in our community, we have our frontline workers who kept us going and kept us safe. And for e-commerce, we also have to think that those who are in the fulfillment centers who pick and pack and ship your goods are the frontline workers of e-commerce.
mm,
And for Global Fashion Group, it has been we owe them so much. And we've worked really, really hard at keeping everyone safe in the company. We have approximately 13,000 employees, many of which work in fulfillment centers, very passionate about what they do. And we really owe them a lot, just like we owe a lot to our frontline workers in our community. And it's been so refreshing to see the power of the group and how everyone had to come together in a seamless way and pivot and focus in order to deliver what we had to deliver to keep everything going. Because as I was saying to my friend, even though we were in lockdown, our kids still continue to grow and they still continue to need, clothes on their back and bigger shoes. And we also, our consumer behavior shifted from heels and dresses to more cozy gears and more wellness products, but there was still a need for the consumers and we had to adapt really quickly. So in that perspective, 2020 was a great acceleration. It also allowed us to focus and to do things with a really sharp focus and to really use the power of 13,000 employees to make the company a great success in 2020. And thanks to our consumer, of course.
Yeah, so that's interesting because you started off with the storm clearing the path, and then this sort of huge acceleration of e-commerce, which I think is fascinating because what we've seen emerge over the past year is, certain businesses have been massively challenged, but others have just completely, I think accelerated was the term you used. And it'd be interesting to see how much of that stays as we return to so-called normality, and how much of that acceleration is now here to stay. And I love how you acknowledge the role of people in all of this, because sometimes when we think about these online businesses and online acceleration, you forget that there are still people behind making all of this happen, and this acknowledgement and value of the human contribution, and the power of the group and the need of the group to pivot is really interesting. And certainly there's been a lot of need to adapt and pivot through 2020. Do you think you've taken away learnings about how you adapt to change? Are there things that you would do differently if you were to do it again? Or are there things that stood out for you as being really powerful that you want to carry forward as things normalize again?
Yeah, well, in terms of, I think, what I would do differently with hindsight, honestly, I don't think I would do anything differently. I think what we do, how we do it is just part of what brings you from there to here or here to there. So there's nothing really I would do differently. In terms of the future, I'm very optimistic for the future, to be honest. I think, as I said earlier, the mantra is that COVID was here to clear our path. And I think it has accelerated a lot of sociological changes that were well overdue. And without the pandemic, they probably would have taken 10, 15, 20 years to happen. So it makes me very, very enthusiastic about the future and what about the future holds. In terms of what I will be focusing on personally, I think working from home is here to stay, perhaps in a hybrid approach, because as we've done a lot of surveys with our employees, we noticed that there's still a certain desire to mingle in the office and socialize. So I don't personally think that the future holds working from home exclusively, but I do think that it has broken the mold, and permanently broken the mold of being in the office for long hours, 5 days a week or more, depending on what you do. So I think for me personally as a leader, I will continue to focus on developing my leadership skills for virtual leadership, which I think none of us were necessarily born with those skills. Like no one had a degree in pandemic, virtually leading teams. Like this was a first for all of us, and we were all learning together, and we are still continuing to learning together. I think I'm at the very early stages of my learning curve, and therefore I will continue to focus on that.
Huh. Online leadership skills. That's true. That's going to be an area that people do need to develop. So I'm curious because Global Fashion Group is a business that spans a really wide range of territories. And you yourself have a very international background. You're Italian, Canadian, dual citizen. You took the bar in French, I think. You're certainly French speaking. You've lived in Switzerland, UK, other places as well, I think. So do you think, given that the workplace will, at least in your view, remain at least partly virtual, does that create opportunities for people around the world who wouldn't necessarily have those opportunities professionally? Does it now mean that you could be sitting in Bangladesh and become a business leader just as much as if you're sitting in the UK or Canada or someone else? Do you think we're going to see a shift in societal barriers, particularly as we see online education coming into its own? What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are yes, absolutely. Again, I think having the privilege to work for a tech company, these are things that are kind of in our DNA to begin with. And it's rather interesting now because with the pandemic, we see kind of the rest of the world waking up to that and starting to move and shift and taking stock of the fact that the more diversity you have of any kind within your group, it actually makes you more competitive. And therefore, I do think that many companies and the workforce altogether will start to shift. I think some industries will be faster than others. I think the tech industry is particularly nimble and agile and changes very quickly because that's just the need of the sector. And other industries are very often more slow to follow. But I do think that eventually this is going to be one of the molds that will have been broken by this pandemic. Yes. And I also think that in terms of gender diversity, the pandemic will help because now with working from home, it will break some of the old patterns and ways of doing things where it was more difficult for women to access certain positions, whether in the boardroom or partnerships or executive leadership positions because of the family requirements. And now that we are all
Having to
equal
deal with
and
it.
working from home, it removes that that
Yes,
man-made
no, I
argument.
think that's right. Well, it's funny because anyone who has kids has had an experience, at least one experience in the last year of having children wandering on Zoom calls and not always behaving appropriately. And it is a great equalizer that the men have dealt with that just as much as the women. So yes, you're right. That's so. If I draw together some of the themes that have come from this discussion, my takeaway is that actually you feel all the disruption that's happened in 2020 has on balance been extremely positive. The role of people and frontline workers and society's perception and value of different roles in society has shifted in a good way. And it's also a social equalizer, both in terms of, I guess, cultural and socioeconomic background, but also gender. And on balance, you're very optimistic about what the future holds and everything that will come out of this. So just to wrap things up, this is a question that I ask everyone I interview, because I know that people watching this are going to be on their own professional journeys, and they would love to hear from you what your words of wisdom would be for anyone on their own professional journey. Do you have any words of advice?
Well, I mean, yes, it's a mantra I have, but it's not only for professional advice, it's just life in general. I think I would say you are always doing better than you think. And I would encourage people to always remember that in every situation, whether it's as a parent, as a leader, as a friend, as the daughter or son of, as an employee, you're always doing better than you think. And that's, I think, something really important to remember.
That's very powerful. And to me, when I hear that, I hear a voice of compassion, actually. Be kind to ourselves and recognize that we are doing better than we think. So thank you for that, sharing that mantra, which I suspect a lot of people will take away. So final question, it's December, people are contemplating the holiday season and easing up a little bit on the pace of work, hopefully, and maybe even taking a little bit of time to catch up on some reading. So what books have you been reading this year that have helped you get through that you would recommend to people? Are there one or more that have stood out for you that you'd love to share?
Yes, definitely. So there's a few. Yeah, there's a few. I think I would probably point to Dare to Lead from Brene Brown. So it's a book I read for the second time during the pandemic because, as I said earlier, I didn't necessarily feel equipped with being a leader in the context of a continuous kind of crisis environment and leading an international team from my home office exclusively through Zoom. So I went back to Brene Brown's absolute amazing book in order to find some inspiration. And it actually resonated with me differently than when I read it the first time. So the whole, work and analysis and around empathy and vulnerability, I think took a very different dimension this time around. I think everyone needed to feel like we're all in it together and we're all vulnerable and no one is doing better than anyone else. We're all struggling with this pandemic. So that definitely brought things under a different light. And again, it's not a new book of 2020, but it was certainly very helpful through the pandemic.
And it's interesting because you talked about online leadership skills earlier on. So it sounds like that's something that kind of resonated for you and helped equip you with developing those skills.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Huh.
And I think the one I would recommend to all of your all the people watching is Solve for Happy. It's from an author called Mo Gatwat. And he's actually an engineer. He's an executive at Google.
Sorry, what's the name of the book? It's called
Solve for Happy.
Happy. That's Mo Gatwat, isn't it? Yes. Yeah, exactly. That is an amazing story, actually. I would recommend that too. Yeah.
Amazing. It's a very logical approach to happiness, but actually when you walk through the logic of it, you're like, yeah, that's all it is.
Yes.
And it's a truly powerful book. Also the context in which he wrote the book, where his son died tragically, and 17 days after the death of his son, this book started to come out just naturally. So I absolutely recommend this as a reading.
So leadership and human resilience and happy are my takeaways. Yana Valletta, I'm going to wrap this up, but this has been really fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I'm also so relieved that we didn't have any broadband issues, because when we first connected, I was worried. So this has been really great. Enjoy the rest of the week and catch up soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.